3,000 meters below the surface of the Pacific Ocean, in total darkness and crushing pressure, something is moving. It's not a submarine. It's not a whale. It is a 700-mile-long rupture in the Earth's crust. And for the first time in human history, we just heard it groan. Off the coast of Newport, Oregon, a sprawling network of fiber optic cables and deep-sea robots called the Ocean Observatories Initiative lays silently on the seafloor. It was built for science. It was built to monitor volcanoes and ocean currents. But its most important discovery is one it was never guaranteed to make. In early 2025, a team of scientists, led by Dr. Zoe Kraus at the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network, announced they had found it. A signal buried in nearly a decade of data. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor coming from the shallowest edge of the Cascadia Subduction Zone. The fault is slipping. Before you go looking for a doorway to stand in, we need to be clear. This discovery is a world first, and the conversations it will spark are critical. If you find this important, hit that comment button and tell us what this means for your region. Your perspective helps shape how we all understand this. Now, this isn't the shaking of a classic earthquake. It's something stranger, a phantom event, a slow slip, where the tectonic plates are grinding past each other at the speed of a growing fingernail. An earthquake in slow motion, releasing the energy of a magnitude 6.5 quake over weeks, without a single person on land feeling a thing. This has never been detected here before. Not in the shallow offshore portion of the fault, the part that builds pressure for the big one. And that's why this is so important. We're seeing this happen directly adjacent to the locked zone, the section of the fault that is not slipping, the part that is snagged, storing up 326 years of relentless tectonic pressure for a single, violent release. The fact you're watching this proves you care about what's happening beneath our feet, and that's exactly why we make these videos. But what's incredible is that the majority of people who watch our work and get enormous value from it are not subscribed. We have a tiny subscription rate. If you feel this information is vital, please take 1 second and hit that subscribe button. It is the single most important way to support this channel and ensure these deep dives can continue. It's an emergency broadcast system for geology. Don't miss the next alert. Let's begin. This monstrous fault line, the Cascadia Subduction Zone, stretches from Northern California to British Columbia. It is the place where the entire Juan de Fuca plate is diving beneath North America. And for centuries, it has been eerily, unnervingly quiet. That silence is a paradox. Faults like the San Andreas in California are noisy. They pop off with magnitude 4 and 5 quakes constantly, releasing stress in small, manageable doses. The Ring of Fire, which terrorizes Japan and Chile, is in a state of perpetual seismic chatter. Those regions live with the constant reminder of the forces at work. The Pacific Northwest does not. Cascadia's silence is not a sign of safety. It is the most dangerous metric possible. It means the fault is not relieving any pressure. It is 100% locked. Every inch of movement between the two tectonic plates, happening right now, is being converted into stored energy. A spring being wound tighter and tighter for centuries, waiting for the moment it finally breaks. The last time it broke was January 26, 1700, around 9 p.m. Pacific time. We know the exact date, not because of records in North America. There were none. We know because of a mystery on the other side of the ocean. That night, a massive tsunami slammed into the coast of Japan without any preceding earthquake. It flooded coastal villages and washed away rice paddies. For generations, Japanese historians called it the orphan tsunami, a wave without a parent. The mystery remained unsolved for nearly 300 years, until the 1990s, when American geologists, led by pioneers like Dr. Chris Goldfinger at Oregon State University, started pulling core samples of mud from the seafloor off the Oregon coast. They discovered a 10,000-year history of underwater landslides called turbidites, triggered by violent shaking, a repeating pattern of massive earthquakes. Their timeline matched perfectly with the records of the orphan tsunami. They had found its parent. The 1700 Cascadia event was a magnitude 9.0 earthquake, a full margin rupture of the entire 700-mile fault line. In an instant, the coastline of the Pacific Northwest dropped by several feet. Entire forests of living Sitka spruce and western red cedar were plunged into the tidal zone. The saltwater killed them, leaving their preserved trunks standing in the mudflats. You can go see them today. They are called the ghost forests. At low tide in places like Nesco in Oregon, they emerge from the sand, an ancient skeletal warning of what this fault is capable of. A physical reminder of what happens when the lock finally breaks. That was 326 years ago. Geologic evidence shows that these magnitude 9.0 events happen, on average, every 400 to 600 years. We are not approaching the window. We are living inside of it. And this recent discovery changes our understanding of the risk we're facing. But what do you think is the biggest unknown here? Our ability to predict it or our ability to survive it? Let us know in the comments. The debate helps us all prepare. The confirmation of shallow slip was not an accident. It was the culmination of a deliberate, audacious, multi-decade hunt for a ghost. Since 2001, scientists had known that slow slip events were happening deep beneath Washington State and Vancouver Island. 30 to 40 kilometers down, the fault was trembling and creeping. But the shallow part, the first 50 miles offshore, remained a total black box. GPS, the primary tool for detecting this kind of slow crustal movement, does not work through miles of seawater. For all we knew, the offshore section was perfectly, completely locked. Finding out for sure required building something that had never existed before, an observatory on the floor of the deep ocean. This is the Ocean Observatories Initiative, or OOI, Regional Cabled Array. Funded by the National Science Foundation, it is one of the most advanced Earth monitoring systems on the planet. Starting in 2014, robotic submersibles laid hundreds of kilometers of high-bandwidth fiber optic and power cables across the Juan de Fuca Plate, connecting a series of deep-sea junction boxes. These are not just simple sensors. They are powered, robotic science labs sitting in the abyss. One critical site, named Slope Base, rests at a depth of 2,920 meters. That's nearly 2 miles down. It sits just 5 kilometers from the deformation front, the trench where the two plates meet. The absolute front line. Another site, Southern Hydrate Ridge, sits 20 kilometers landward on the overriding North American plate. Together, they form a tripwire. But the seismic signals of a slow slip are so faint, they are almost indistinguishable from the background noise of the ocean. So geophysicists like Dr. Noel Bartlow from the University of Kansas and Dr. Mark Zumberge from Scripps deployed an even more sensitive tool. Between 2022 and 2024, they installed seafloor optical fiber strain meters, instruments capable of measuring microscopic stretching of the seafloor itself. They were placed there for one reason: to find shallow, slow slip. Dr. Zoe Kraus and her team at the University of Washington took on the Herculean task of analyzing the data that had been collected since 2015. They processed 9 years of continuous recordings from the ocean bottom seismometers. They had to teach their algorithms to distinguish the rumble of passing ships, the calls of whales, and the random noise of the deep ocean from the specific, low-frequency tremor of a tectonic plate grinding in slow motion. They isolated and analyzed over 85,000 potential acoustic and seismic signals from the Slope Base site alone, and buried within that mountain of noise, they found it: a clear, repeating pattern of tectonic tremor. The discovery proves the shallow front of the Cascadia Fault is not a single, perfectly locked gate. It's a complex machine. Parts of it are creeping, generating these silent, slow-motion tremors. This creeping loads stress directly onto the adjacent locked patches. Imagine 3 people trying to hold a heavy door shut. If one person lets go, the other 2 have to take on their load. The slow slip zones are letting go, transferring their share of the tectonic strain directly onto the stuck sections that will one day produce the magnitude 9.0 earthquake. The silent earthquake is actively setting the stage for the violent one. The locked zone is being squeezed from the deep by the well-known slow slip under the continent, and now, we know for a fact, it's also being squeezed from the shallow side by the newly discovered slip offshore. It is a vice, tightening with each silent tremor. The engineering just to see this is mind-bending, but it gets even wilder. Scientists are now experimenting with a technology called Distributed Acoustic Sensing, or DAS. They are effectively hacking existing commercial undersea telecommunication cables. By shooting lasers down the fiber optic glass, they can use the microscopic imperfections within the cable itself as thousands of individual seismic sensors. An entire submarine cable becomes a continuous 1,000-kilometer-long seismometer. We are building a nervous system on the seafloor, a way to feel the planet's faintest pulse. This is incredible science, and if you know someone who lives in the Pacific Northwest or anywhere near a fault line, they need to see this. Share this video. It's not about fear, it's about understanding the world we live on. And if you've gotten this far, a simple click on the like button tells the algorithm that this is a conversation worth having. It helps more people find this crucial information. For decades, our models of what a Cascadia earthquake would look like were based on a set of fundamental assumptions about the geology, the depth of the fault, the type of rock, the shape of the seafloor. In April of 2026, one of those fundamental assumptions was proven wrong, and the consequences are severe. At the annual meeting of the Seismological Society of America, Dr. Aaron Worth, a seismologist with the U.S. Geological Survey, presented brand new findings. Her team had been using an array of temporary, high-density seismometers along the northern Oregon coast. What they found redrew the map of the coming disaster. Previous models had estimated that the subducting Juan de Fuca plate was about 25 kilometers deep beneath the Oregon coastline. Dr. Worth's research showed that was incorrect. The plate is actually 5 kilometers shallower, only 20 kilometers deep. 5 kilometers may not sound like much when you're talking about tectonic plates, but in seismology, it changes everything. The source of the earthquake is now significantly closer to cities and towns on the surface. It's the difference between a bomb detonating a mile away and the same bomb detonating just a few blocks from your house. The energy arrives with far more ferocity. The direct result? Dr. Worth stated it plainly. This new, shallower depth could increase the estimated peak ground acceleration, the violent, damaging shaking, by 9 to 17%. Think about that. The worst-case scenario we had been planning for decades, was an underestimate. The building codes, the bridge designs, the evacuation plans, they were all based on a level of shaking that we now know is too low. The violence of the event will be up to 17% greater than we thought. As Dr. Worth explained, characterizing the presence of a sedimentary layer, as well as its likely thickness, helps scientists to more accurately estimate ground shaking from future earthquakes. And it got worse. The same Uskis survey uncovered another threat, buried right beneath the town of Tillamook, Oregon. They identified a massive, deep sedimentary basin that no one knew was there. A basin is essentially a bowl of softer, looser earth and rock. When seismic waves from an earthquake enter a basin like this, they get trapped. They reverberate, they amplify, and they prolong the shaking, turning solid ground into something that behaves like a bowl of liquid jello. This effect has been known for years. The 1985 Mexico City earthquake, the 1989 Loma Prieta quake in the Bay Area, much of their deadliest destruction occurred in areas built on soft soils and sedimentary basins that amplified the shaking exponentially. The discovery of a similar basin under Tillamook, combined with the shallower fault line, creates a double whammy of increased seismic hazard. The shaking will be stronger, and it will last longer. This isn't just a coastal problem. The effects will ripple inland. One of the most vulnerable points in the entire Pacific Northwest is a 6-mile stretch of Portland, Oregon, known as the Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub, or CEI Hub. It sits right on the banks of the Willamette River, on soil known to be highly susceptible to liquefaction, the process where shaking turns solid ground into a liquid slurry. More than 90% of all liquid fuel for the state of Oregon is stored in this one location, in massive, aging tank farms. A magnitude 9.0 Cascadia earthquake would almost certainly cause the ground beneath them to fail. The tanks would rupture. The result would be a secondary catastrophe, millions of gallons of fuel spilling into the river, creating an uncontainable environmental disaster and a potential inferno in the heart of the state's largest city. The discovery of shallow slip offshore was the first shoe to drop. The revelation that the shaking will be even more violent was the second. We are now faced with a new reality. The monster that we knew was sleeping at our door is bigger, closer, and more powerful than our models had ever predicted. A lot of you have been watching our videos for a while and find them valuable, but I have to ask again, because it's that important for us. If you haven't subscribed, please do it now. It takes a second, and it makes all the difference. I know, I sound like a broken record, but think of it as our own little seismic alert system. Don't miss the next one. So, what does this all mean, right now? It is easy to hear fault slipping and think the big one has begun. That is a critical misconception. These slow slip events are a normal, regular part of the subduction zone cycle. They happen on a recurring basis, every 10 to 15 months for the deep events, and we're just now learning the timing for the shallow ones. They do not mean a magnitude 9.0 is imminent this afternoon. What they do mean is that the machinery of the subduction zone is working exactly as expected. The fault is actively loading. Every slow slip event, wherever it occurs, modestly increases the stress on the locked sections. It nudges the fault a microscopic step closer to catastrophic failure. We aren't watching the mainspring break. We are watching it being wound. Our science is caught in a race against geology. We are getting better and better at seeing the danger. The new Cascadia Offshore Subduction Zone Observatory, or COSZO, project set to launch in the summer of 2026, will add even more advanced sensors to the seafloor array. New nanometrics Atlantis seismic packages, ultra-precise absolute pressure gauges that can detect the seafloor rising or falling by millimeters as the plates strain. We will soon be able to watch the fault breathe in real time. But seeing it is not the same as stopping it. A tsunami, triggered by the seafloor lurching upwards, could reach heights of 100 feet in some coastal inlets, arriving just 15 to 20 minutes after the shaking starts. There is no time to wait for confirmation. The earthquake itself is the only warning you will get. The science has now given us two undeniable truths. First, the discovery of shallow tremors confirms the entire system is active. The creeping portions are loading the locked portions, squeezing the megathrust from both sides. The silence we hear on the surface is not peace. It is the sound of tension building to an impossible level. Second, the 2026 geological updates prove the consequences will be more severe. The shaking will be measurably more violent for coastal communities, amplified by hidden geology we never knew existed. Our old assumptions were too optimistic. This forces an uncomfortable question, the same one asked in Las Vegas about its water, or in Texas about its disappearing lakes. We are surrounded by forces of nature, operating on scales that dwarf human engineering. We can drill deeper tunnels, we can install more sensitive seismometers, but can we outrun physics? Did we just build the world's most sophisticated geological listening post only to confirm, in perfect, high-resolution detail, that we are living on borrowed time? The tools are extraordinary. The new knowledge is vital. We can now see the mechanism of our own potential destruction with a clarity that was science fiction just 20 years ago. But the knowledge doesn't change the outcome. It only sharpens our focus on the stakes. The final question is not an engineering one. The sensors are installed. The data is flowing. It's a question of will. What do we do with the time the fault is giving us? Because the one thing the ghost forests, the orphan tsunami, and the silent tremors all agree on is that the time is not infinite. The fault is slipping. The strain is building. The clock that started ticking at 9 p.m. on January 26, 1700, has not stopped. And I know this is the third time. I'm starting to feel like your mom asking you to clean your room. But it's just that vital. If you've made it to the end of this journey, you are exactly the kind of curious mind we make these for. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe. It's the final,